Time up. Deep right field. Down the line it goes. Castellanos is out of room. It's out of runner goes. 3-2 pitch hit down the line. Is it fair? It is a fair ball. Into the corner. Off and running. Chu. Yu Chang around third. He's going to score easily. And into second. Hit hard. Hit deep. Up and out. Goes Amed Rosario. And there's a fly ball. Left field. It's deep. It's up. It's gone to the porch. Pretty well. Deep left center field. It is gone to Souvenir City.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Guardians of the CLE podcast. I'm your host, Max Goldstein, joined as always by my co-host, Mel Kirby. And to lead things off, first things first, we want to give a gigantic congratulations to Jose Ramirez, Andreas Jimenez, and Emmanuel Clase, who will all be representing the Cleveland Guardians this year in Los Angeles for the All-Star Game. And I know Guardians Nation is behind us there, Mel. But before we get into those three guys, as of today, Cleveland remains in second place in the Central, 4 games behind Minnesota, who beat Milwaukee today. Chicago will leave Cleveland and head to Minnesota for a 4-game series, while Cleveland closes out their first half of the season at home against Detroit. And we got to get a win today against Chicago to keep us around those 3 games up on Chicago as well. And we hope that Chicago beats up on Minnesota a little bit as we head into the All-Star break. But Mel, it's kind of been that kind of season, up and down, roller coaster type fashion, playing a little bit better ball late, and, capping off that rough couple weeks stretch. But wanted to hear what your thoughts were, especially about, let's start it off with Shane Bieber yesterday. What a performance.
Yeah, I think the thing with this team is they've been so feast or famine this year that sometimes it feels like they're 10 games back, right? Like we just capped off a road trip to Detroit and Kansas City where we went 1-6 when I was fully expecting them to go 5-2, at least 4-3 against the bottom 2 teams in the division. And they were in their 18 games and 16 days stretch, and they were just asleep at the wheel all last week. But then they come home and the bats break out against Chicago a little bit. Obviously, they were shut down in game 2 last night, which we'll get to, but it's just the epitome of this team. They've been either really up or really down, and that's to be expected with a young team. And, I think it's been a really cool first half where we've got to see 10 guys make their major league debuts. Steven Kwan and Oscar Gonzalez are the only 2 guys to have hits in their first 5 games. Nolan's streak got snapped in game 1 yesterday, even though he hit the ball harder than almost any of the games he's played. But those are like the fun storylines of this season. But before we get into it, that's a good time to mention that next week we're still working out the details, but we're going to do some sort of Guardians roundtable episode. As we know, they're going to be on the All-Star break. So we're going to wrap up the first half, preview the second half of the season, and I don't know, Max, see how our predictions are looking at here at the halfway point and see how off or on we were. We'll have a few special guests, so everybody make sure you tune in to that next week. But, there's going to be a lot to talk about.
Yeah. I think it's going to be – I think it'll be really fun. Thinking about my predictions, I believe I had us finishing 3 or 4 above 500. So we're right, right along that line right there. But I'm hoping I'm wrong. I hope we have a phenomenal second half and we crush that prediction there. But, just to recap what's been going on this past week, it's been a little weird. If you track all the way back to last Tuesday, right? We dropped that game 11-4, right? We absolutely get annihilated in a baseball game. That would get us to the point of dropping 11 out of 15 at that point. So it looked as if the team was just limping into a day off after coming to the end of an 18 games in 16 days stretch, whatever it may have been. But I don't even really know where to start here. The offense kind of just goes as Jose Ramirez goes. And if he's not finishing the first half strong, that's kind of just where the team goes. I want you to sort of, give me your thoughts on that. Jose seems to be picking up a little bit of late, but, track back to last week, it wasn't so.
Yeah, Jose's picking it up a little bit now, and it seems like everybody around him is getting a feel for that bat again too. And we've said it before. This offense goes as Jose goes. He may be the number 3 hitter, but he kind of inspires all the guys around him. And it's like when the whole team is in a slump like they were the last couple weeks, I think he tries so hard to just pick the entire team up and put them on his back and get everybody out of their slumps. And that on the broadcast last Tuesday, it looked like his thumb was heavily wrapped. There was definitely some extra tape on it. Him and Tito keep saying the thumb is fine. It's not bothering him. So whatever the case may be, whether it's the thumb or whether he's just in a slump, the whole team is just trying to do too much. And I think I may have mentioned it last week, but it just kind of looks like none of them trust the guy behind them. And for good reason. Everybody was struggling. There wasn't one guy really who was hot. Even Ahmed, who was super hot in the month of June, really, really cooled off these first couple weeks of July. But then you compound that in Detroit, the pitching was struggling too. And we have a bullpen being held together with scotch tape at this point, all the doubleheaders. I mean, we have a bullpen made up of other teams' guys that didn't work out for them, and then our failed starters. It was bound to collapse at some point. But luckily, a couple guys now are really starting to pick it up. We're going to get more in depth into that in a minute. But if even just one of Karinchak, Sandlin, Stefan, which we see Sandlin and Stefan picking it up, that's going to do wonders out there for that bullpen, especially because we see, Eli Morgan struggling. And, it looks like he's kind of moving out of that setup role. And he just doesn't have the stuff for as much as we were all rooting for him and wanted him to be that guy. He just doesn't really have that lights out stuff that you want to see out of that setup man in front of Class A. But yeah, everything that could go wrong did go wrong in Detroit.
Yeah. I mean, they completed the 4-game sweep over there, and it was incredibly disappointing, right? You're thinking we're playing rough ball right now. Going into Detroit should be a couple wins at the minimum, and then you walk away with nothing. I mean, this team was definitely hanging their head, and it didn't get any better, right? That Friday night game, we return home against the Kansas City, we play the Kansas City Royals, drop a game there, but Nolan Jones, right? Something to smile about. Made his MLB debut, had an RBI double in his first at bat and a single in the 7th before Mercado came in, to score a run for him. But, this was a fun game until the end, right? It was just that back end of the bullpen you were talking about. We had the lead most of the game and sort of collapsed out there. But I want to hear, with Nolan Jones having his MLB debut, this was a guy that you brought up multiple times on the podcast before. What's it finally like seeing him playing in this in an everyday lineup out here?
I just think it's a long time coming. As we know, he's the former number 1 overall prospect in the entire organization. He had the ankle injury. He was really struggling last year. And again, we got to remember 2020, these minor league guys didn't pitch at all. They didn't play at all. There were no minor league games. And we heard the story about how he actually stood on top of the parking garage to watch his good friend Tristan McKenzie's one of his starts in 2020 while he was over at extended spring training in Lake County. But that's the kind of road bumps he's had to go through to get to where he's at today. Even for a number 1 overall prospect, he still had bumps in the road, but he kept working. He kept, they talked about last year, he's done a lot of work over the offseason, shortening that swing. He's able to get to a lot more pitches than he was before, which has really helped lower his strikeout rate. He's walking a lot more, and he's an on-base machine. Yeah. And his energy is outstanding. We saw his whole family there in Kansas City. They're all cheering for him. I don't think the smile left Nolan's face the entire night. And he's a guy I was starting to feel bad for. Like, man, what is it going to take for this kid to get his chance? Like, either call him up or trade him, because at this point, he has nothing left to prove in AAA. And we got to think defensively too, right? He was a third baseman. Once Jose got extended, they had to move him to right field full time. So he's out there playing right field in the major league game. And that hasn't even been his position for more than a year, right? He just moved out there and he looks fine out there. He doesn't look, he's not killing us out there. And I just couldn't be happier for him to get his shot. And sometimes that's what a struggling team needs, is just a spark in that dugout. We saw it when Oscar Gonzalez got called up. It can do wonders, especially for a young team. Like, you got to think all these kids came up together. Quan, Tristan, Nolan Jones, Oscar Gonzalez, all these guys have came up through, the minors together. So I'm sure it's a blast for them to all be playing in Cleveland together.
Right. And it kind of, you hit the nail right on the head there. It kind of put our offense and our lineup at ease, having him in that lineup. And let's talk about that missile, 457 feet into the fountain in Kansas City. Like, this kid's got some real pop off the bat. But, he's going to be a pleasure to watch for a long time here. He looks like a natural. Obviously, the fielding needs a little bit of work, but everything that I've seen so far at the plate, other than a bit of patience here and there, looks really good. His swing is super natural. So I'm really eager to see how he finishes the season. But on the note of home runs, right, on that Friday night loss in Kansas City, Franmil Reyes had a go-ahead two-run home run in the seventh inning, which was his 100th of his career. So just a little note there for everybody.
He kind of picked right up where he left off in Detroit too. We didn't get much offense, while we were in Detroit. But Franmil had a home run in that Wednesday game, that Wednesday to 2 loss in Detroit. And that was his third extra base hit of the series. So although his overall numbers may still be low, his numbers since coming off the injured list have been much better. He's up in the upper 250s. He's got 5-6 home runs. Like, he's starting to get that power back. He's starting to get that swing back. He's using all parts of the field again. And that's just going to be massive for him to really pick it up, along with Josh Naylor batting behind Jose Ramirez. Hopefully that can get Jose back going before we head into the All-Star break too.
Yeah, that streamline of production. Like, that's the objective. That's the goal. I mean, and when you have guys like Jose Ramirez, Josh Naylor, and Franmil Reyes batting back to back to back, you can do some serious damage against some pitching staffs in the majors here. So another guy that, we were really high on to start the season, and it might just be that he's gassed right now. Eli Morgan, right? The reason why we weren't able to finish out that game and get a win last Friday night, Eli Morgan blew the game a little bit, right? Gave up a game-tying two-run home run to Whit Merrifield in the 8th. And he's been struggling lately, right? Tito's now using Stephan in the 8th a little bit. And I think it's just, 18 games in 16 days. And
they're sitting on that changeup too.
Yeah. Eli Morgan, he's got that devastating fastball changeup duo, but when that changeup's a little flat, they're just going to take it for a ride. And I think that's what's happening.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that makes this so tough too, right? Like, we mentioned the whole team struggling, and then we had Eli Morgan and Emmanuel Clase to just rely on at the end of a game. If you can just get it to the 8th inning, we can win the ball game. And Eli Morgan, decides to fall off a cliff. And I think everything you mentioned plays a part in that. And they're just sitting on that changeup, and his fastball doesn't have the velocity to just blow it by guys. And he's another guy who relies on that pinpoint command. When he misses, he's missing right over the plate. And that's why we see him getting taken for a ride. But, after that game tying home run he gave up, the most frustrating part was the 9th inning. They load the bases in the top of the 9th. Naylor had that pinch hit single. So we got bases loaded, 1 out. We see Miles Straw weakly ground out to 3rd, and then Quan line out to right field. And once they didn't score there, you just kind of got the feeling that this one wasn't going to go our way. And, I held on to this little sliver of hope, like maybe he'll bring Emmanuel Clase in, even though we know Tito's a manager who likes to prepare for the next inning that you might not even get, right? Yeah. He brings in Sam Hentges, who he's been struggling for a couple weeks now, just slowly but surely. He's coming back down to earth a little bit. But he gave up that leadoff double to start the 9th. And I'm like, here we go, right? Who could have predicted this? But then I think it was Isbell was trying to bunt, and they had him bunt with 2 strikes. So Hentges gets the strikeout. So I'm thinking, all right, maybe he's going to get lucky here. And then bam, Michael Taylor hit the game-winning single to right. And Oscar Mercado came on for defense when he pinch ran for Nolan earlier in the game, and just an awful throw to home plate all the way up the line, which, as we know, it's neither here nor there now, but just such a frustrating game because you don't expect guys like Eli Morgan to blow the game. Like you said, he was one of the main guys we relied on earlier in the season. So it's tough.
Right. It's kind of like seeing Jose Ramirez strike out with the bases loaded.
Yeah.
Like you have all of these different predictions in your head as to what's about to happen, and the last thing that you predict to happen actually occurs. So, I mean, look, Eli Morgan has been having a really good season. He's run into a couple blocks here, but I'm sure this All-Star break is going to be good for the team overall, but he's going to be getting in some extra work there. But, just to roll into the rest of that weekend series, Saturday, the bats really broke out, right? The first road win in 17 days, we win 13-1, and offense had a season-high 23 hits, including a season-high 10 extra base hits, and every play in the lineup had a hit. Like, did we use up all of our offense in one game?
Yeah, like that had to be frustrating for Zach Plesac. Like, all right, I start tomorrow. They score 13 runs today. What does that mean for me for tomorrow? But, in the midst of that outstanding offensive game where you mentioned the mammoth 457-foot home run for Nolan, Jose had a big game that game. He had a home run. That was his first since June 10th, so that was big to see. Miles reached base 3 times. And, mixed up in all that is just another gem from Tristan McKenzie. He went 6 innings, no runs, only 3 hits, struck out 4. He did walk 5. So he didn't even have his best stuff and still managed to turn in a line like that at the end of the day. But those 4 double plays turned behind him kind of helped balance out those walks a little bit. But, just a couple weeks ago, we're concerned about Tristan because the whole month of June, it seemed he was struggling. And then for him to come out and have back-to-back dominant starts against the Yankees and then to follow it up with Kansas City is just super promising to see. And if he can move back up to that number 2 guy behind Bieber, that's a tremendous start to your rotation coming out of the break.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And, right. Like, that Saturday was just packed with offense, great pitching, good defense, got out of some jams. And my guy, Plesac, right? I made a stupid call saying that Zach Plesac was going to win north of 15 games this season. And it's not because of his talent. It's because the team literally falls dead every single time he's on the bump, right? He stays begging for run support. We lost that following day on Sunday, 5-1. But Plesac, he's only getting 2.74 runs per game, which is 3rd lowest amongst qualified starters. And today he also ended his 7-game streak that day he ended his 7-game streak of quality starts, pitching 5 innings pitched, 4 runs, 6 hits, 5 Ks and a walk, right? So Kansas City basically hit a bunch of singles until he fell. And when the offense only scores 1, you know what that means for Zach Plesac? You can only give up 0. So it doesn't make sense when this guy's on the bump.
Yeah, and I mean that lineup Sunday. I mean, when you have Owen Miller and Ernie Clement in the same lineup, like I start to get nervous about what production is going to come from the bottom of the lineup, and we're seeing it. I understand guys need days off, especially when, we're coming up to the break here. Guys are getting gassed. I mean, Andres Jimenez has been getting drilled by pitches left and right. We know he needs some time off his feet, but just to think they only had 5 hits on the whole game, and Owen Miller scored the only run on a wild pitch in the 9th. But 39-year-old Zach Greinke, it feels like he's been terrorizing us forever. And
what a joke.
I mean, they were just so off balance with his 90-mile-an-hour fastball and 70-mile-an-hour curveball. Like, they were so off balance, even the veterans. He just had them guessing the entire game. And their best shot, their best shot is to get to him early, and they didn't, and they let him settle in. But Nick Sandlin, another scoreless inning, that's 2 days in a row. I'm telling you, that's going to be a massive development for that bullpen if he can get it together. Go ahead, sorry.
If he gets his confidence and consistency up, having Sandlin back in there, as he's keys to this bullpen, right? And we're all rooting for him. It's just he's been walking, he's been missing the zone. And, if this is really a sign of things to come, it's really, really going to be a big break for this bullpen. But back to Zach Greinke, absolutely silly. Just, it's not 96. It's not even 91. It's literally a 90-mile-per-hour fastball followed up with like a 74, 75-mile-per-hour curveball. You don't even have to sit on an Aroldis Chapman type of heat. Like, I don't understand how
Rich
you can
Hill
get off
did
balance.
the same thing to him. Rich Hill kept him. They're either way, way, way early on that curveball or they're super late on that fastball. It's like when they went up, they didn't have a plan. They were guessing, and they were guessing wrong all day long. And like I said, Rich Hill did the same thing to him, just like 2 weeks, 3 weeks prior. It's so frustrating to see. And you hear guys talk about that. Like I've heard players say it's almost easier to hit like a 98-mile-an-hour fastball than it is like a 90 with some movement. I think because that's like the norm these days, right? That upper 90-mile-an-hour heat. It's like they get more work against that than they do that mix Greinke was coming out there with. But
yeah, no, I mean it makes
frustrating,
sense, right? Like I'm not putting myself into any sort of class with these guys, right? But I played college baseball, and then I followed it up with let's just play a little bit of recreational softball. Boom, first game, 3 straight groundouts to third. It really is that different, right? When you're expecting all of this heat, and then you have a guy come out there like Greinke who's throwing like a top prospect in high school, it's going to be a little different for these guys. But either way, let's scrap that whole last week. I'm sick of seeing KC. I'm tired of seeing the Tigers. I love seeing the White Sox because what we do on this team is we beat them up. We started the series on Monday. We got a win 8-4. But just a couple notes before that game started, right? We DFA'd Mercado once again. Alex Call gets promoted from AAA, and he came over from the White Sox in the 2018 Yordan Alvarez trade. And he's mostly a system filler, good soldier, not one of those top guys, but plays good defense, so we can see him in the same role as Mercado, filling in late games, right? But pretty good power potential, right? He batted .283, 16 doubles, 11 home runs, 44 RBIs with 48 walks in 68 games in AAA. So the production's there. We're waiting to see what he's going to do up top.
Yeah, he was actually, I think, second in the International League in OPS too, which is a good measure of, the slugging and getting on base. So he's got an act for that. It's kind of cool that he got to debut against the team that traded him. I'm sure that was cool for him. He had family in town, I believe, yesterday too. But yeah, I think the team just finally realized, like, not really sure why we brought Mercado back when he could provide the same type of thing for us. He's younger. Give him his chance. I mean, he's going to get DFA'd when Oscar Gonzalez, he's out of options. So he'll get DFA'd once Oscar Gonzalez comes back. He'll most likely clear waivers. He'll end up back at Columbus because, like you said, he's just a good soldier. Kind of like Bobby Bradley. He's been at Columbus now, but the concerning thing is what it tells me is Oscar's going to be out a little longer than I think they were hoping for, which is, they didn't want Mercado long-term. They were hoping it'd be like a week or so. But I think once they found out it would be a little bit longer on Ogon, they decided to, make a move with a guy with a little bit more potential. But, then that begs the question, where do you play these guys? They're playing Nolan Jones and right now. I think what I would do is I'd leave Quan in left, Straw in center, play Oscar Gonzalez in right, and move Nolan Jones up to first base. I know he's only played a couple games at first base. But as we saw in this Monday game, Owen Miller literally dropped 2 balls again that hit him right in the glove. And it's not even like the difficult play, like even the broadcasters, and we know Matt Underwood and Rick Manning are not hard on the guys, but they're like, what's he doing? It hit him right in the glove. And I mean, you got to think the other infielders can't have much confidence right now throwing the ball over to first when he's in the game. And I think so much so that he's in his own head about it. I think he's bringing his bat out to the field with him. And we got to remember, he's not a first baseman. He's a second baseman. He plays a decent second base, but we got to stop pretending like he's Josh Naylor's backup at first base, because he's not. Either move Nolan Jones there when Oscar Gonzalez gets back, or you're going to need to think about going out to acquire a first baseman with a little bit of control at the trade deadline. I would have loved a guy like Trey Mancini. I'm not sure that the Orioles are going to be in sell mode like they usually are with their 9-game winning streak they're in the midst of.
Right.
Even a Josh Bell from the Nationals. I know he's kind of like a rental guy, but you know, first base is kind of a weakness in the system overall. I mean, you have John Kenzie Noel, who just got promoted to Akron, who's tearing the cover off the ball there too. But, you know, it's going to be a year and a half or so before we see him in Cleveland. So they got to figure out what to do at first base, because ideally I think they would like Josh Naylor to DH a little bit more, but they just don't have the options at first base. And honestly, I think the fact that Owen plays first base is the reason he's not in Columbus yet. He's kind of approaching that 500 plate appearances mark where they should have a pretty good idea who he's going to be at the major league level. Right. And I appreciate that they're playing him every day to get that long look at him. But you got to think his time's, you know, kind of running short here a little bit. So
yeah, his play has just been so inconsistent at first base, and there's only like once in a blue moon will I say like, wow, that was a great play. But most of them are just like, you're expected to make these plays. Why is it hitting the heel of your glove? Why are you not catching?
His glove was in the dirt. Like, what? He knocked the ball out of his own glove. It was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen.
I know. Well, you know, he's in his own head about it. His teammates are trying to pick him up, back him up a little bit on it. But at a certain point, Tito's just going to be like, listen, any high leverage situation, we are getting him off of that base. Like, I'm not going to lose a game because Owen Miller's defense is just not at par for me. So
also I wanted to say before we move on to Tuesday's doubleheader,
right? I
think Monday, one of the best signs that I saw in this game was how they got off to a fast start in the first inning.
Huge.
You know, in the first inning, you had Nolan Jones and Miles Straw with 2-run singles. And that kind of gives the starter a chance to breathe a little bit. And thank God they did, because Cal did not have his best outing on Monday. He gave up that 3-run homer, but his changeup was cooked on Monday. He was missing so bad with it. He was splitter heavy the whole game. They're sitting on it. But he gritted it out, right? Because they gave him that early lead. He was able to work through it, grit it out, and he was still able to go 6 innings. But the fireworks, there were some fireworks a little bit in this game. We had Stephen Kwan and Andres Gimenez, which, let me add, is the 7th hit by pitch in 12 games for Andres Gimenez. He's going to have to be put in body wrap pretty soon. Right. But Jose gets drilled in the 8th. So that's the 3rd guy they've hit of ours in the night. Tito finally came out of the dugout, had some words with the pitcher and the umpire, but I'm glad he finally spoke up. I know Tito's teams aren't teams that retaliate and things like that, but when you're playing your division rival, you got to get out there and send a message like, and you just hit our superstar. Like, no, this ain't going to work. Like, they've been hitting us all day.
And right? especially what Josh Naylor did to them earlier on in the season with those, it's time. It's time. And I've been saying this for a little bit. I need to see a brawl brewing, man. Nobody wants to go up against our guys, right? They're not going to be the ones to charge the mound. And I think, you know, Tito was doing the right thing, amping us up a little bit. But you were talking about that early game success, right? Getting on the board early, giving our pitchers a shot. How about Miles Straw, right?
6-game hitting streak. He might be back. I might eat my words. He might be back.
10 out of his last 22. I would eat my words too, right? Because I was a fan of him, and then I was just like, get him out of here, right? Obviously, I still want him in the outfield. He's a phenomenal defender. It's just so frustrating watching him, up at the plate. But, you know, what he was able to do over these last over this last week or so, 6-game hitting streak, that's pretty cool to see. But we'll just roll right into the doubleheader yesterday. Shane Bieber brought it up at the beginning of the podcast, was absolutely phenomenal, and complete game with only 95 pitches, sort of Corey Kluber-esque there. Efficient, not trying to do too much, letting the players put it in play, letting that defense behind him take care of business. and couldn't have come at a better time with, night game to follow. Obviously, it didn't go our way, but he only allowed 3 hits while striking out 7. He didn't walk anyone. And this was Bieber's 4th complete game, his first since August of 2019. So I kind of wanted to hear what you were thinking, watching that game and when watching him deal the way he was.
Yeah, I think he had kind of a clunker in Detroit the previous week when we kind of really needed him to step up and stop that losing streak. So I think he made it a point yesterday. He was going to get deep in the game. If he had to wear some runs, he was going to do it. He went in with a purpose. He wanted to save that bullpen, get a feel for that knuckle curve early. And he did it, and we had some timely hits against the White Sox rookie. And, once you saw the matchup for the night game, Connor Pilkington versus Dylan Cease, you knew you got to win game 1 with Bieber.
Yeah. And little fun fact here, before that complete game performance by Shane Bieber, Cleveland had the longest active complete game drought in the majors. And the last one will very much surprise you. Aaron Savali on August 19th of 2020 in Pittsburgh was the last time before Shane Bieber's complete game the other night that we had one of those. So Monday night, you could basically guess what was going to happen. Connor Pilkington matched up against Chicago's ace and Dylan Cease. We lost the game 7-0. Bats go silent. But I kind of have a rule, right? I don't ever expect a team who has a doubleheader to go in and win game 1 and game 2. If you win game 1, it's likely you're going to lose game 2. And if you lose game 1, you have a pretty good shot in game 2. So
it's frustrating because Dylan Cease is a stud and he should have been an all-star this year. He got snubbed. He was wearing that snub all over him last night, but he didn't even have his best stuff last night. He was walking guys. I think he made it five innings, maybe 6, but they had opportunities and that they couldn't buy a clutch hit. They were getting guys on base. They went 1 for 9 with runners in scoring position. But most notably, they had the bases loaded late in the game, and Tito, kept Luke Maile in there. And again, I was frustrated too. I really just think it's because Hedges is coming back off that concussion. Right. It was only 3 innings. He would have had to come in and play, which if he were fully healthy and didn't just have the concussion, I think he would have had Nolan Jones pinch hit there, but struck Maile out on 3 pitches. And again, I think that was just a bad signing. He's not good defensively. He's not good offensively. And you got to wonder once Brian Lavastida is done rehabbing in Akron, if they're going to DFA Maile and, give Lavastida his shot before it's bow time next season. But yeah, they loaded the bases again in the 8th, struck out Miller, struck out Nolan Jones. And then Ernie lined out to end the threat. So what's crazy, they struck out 14 times, which is super rare for them. They actually own the lowest strikeout rate in all of baseball at only like 18.6%. So yeah, not like them to see them strike out that much.
Yeah, game 2 was a dud. Really, I mean, we didn't take advantage when we had guys in position to score. There was no timely hitting, and the pitching wasn't great. So I mean, Chicago was threatening all game. You kind of just read this from the outset that it wasn't going to be so pretty, but just scrap that up. We got a game tonight. Aaron Savali versus Lucas Giolito. Lucas Giolito in his career has been pretty nasty, but this year specifically, we've seen him get knocked around a little bit. So if we can, again, get on the board early, I think that's going to be the X factor for our success. But this weekend, the White Sox, as we noted earlier on in the podcast, they head to Minnesota, where they're hopefully going to have some success against Minnesota. But it all starts tonight, right? We have to take care of business. We have to get a W because, the later on into the season we get, the more valuable these games become. And we're still pre-All-Star break, but this is definitely a very important game tonight.
Yeah, you really want to go out and take this series against Chicago so that we're able to root for Chicago, right?
Right.
Against Minnesota this weekend. So we could finish within a game out of first place heading into the break. And if you would have told me that before the season, knowing how young of a team we were going to have, I would have taken that every single chance. But just to kind of wrap this up. So our lineup tonight, Andres Gimenez gets a day off. We mentioned all those hit by pitches, but we got Quan leading off in left, Ahmed at short, Jose at third, Naylor at first, Reyes DHing and batting fifth, Nolan Jones in right, Owen Miller at second, Austin Hedges catching, and Miles Straw in center field. So like you said, starts with Juan, Rosario, and Ramirez at the top.
Yep.
If Juan and Rosario can get their speed on base in front of Jose, I think they got a good chance to kind of jump out early.
Yeah. I
Let's
mean,
go get a win.
Today is the day that we need to go get a win. We definitely have the lineup to do it. But real quick, Thursday through Sunday, we're going to have the Tigers, coming to town. It'll be Tristan on Thursday night, Plesac to follow on Friday. Saturday is Cal Quantrill versus Michael Pineda, and then Shane Bieber will cap it off on Sunday against Bo Briesque before we break for that All-Star game or All-Star weekend. But once again, guys, don't forget to tune in for our special All-Star Break Roundtable episode next Tuesday with some very special guests as we break down the first half, preview the second half, and let's see how the predictions are looking as we get later on into the season. But I wanted to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. Want to pass it off to Mel to take us away. But, yeah, thanks for listening, guys.
Let's go win the series. Stay safe and stay healthy, guys. See you next week.